How can I reconnect with my partner during times of difficulty or conflict?
First, we can recognize that um, that often what we see in our partners is someone that is in the process of becoming who they really are. And in that process, we intimately see each other's weaknesses and strengths. And some of those are kind of built into the fact that we are here in this material world, right? We have the four defects. You know, we have imperfect senses. You know, we have a tendency to be an illusion. We make countless mistakes, and we have a tendency to cheat. So with that, in our relationships, these kind of things are going to inevitably appear. False ego, we can get critical with each other. We can get defensive. We can argue. We may say mean things to each other. You know, sometimes, as Ekavir and Rajalila were mentioning, stonewalling or cutting off communication. I mean, these are patterns that are more or less in all relationships. But the key thing to remember, I think, is, as Srila Prabhupada described, is that we are all unripe mangoes. And it takes time for us to actually ripen. And we definitely will ripen. It just takes time and support. And sometimes that process is bitter. Sometimes it's sweet. Sometimes it's bittersweet. But it's all part of the ripening process. And we can support each other in that. And one of the keys that makes a huge difference in whether relationships grow or erode is making repair attempts. There's a amazing marriage researcher, very well known, John Gottman, and he's done research for looking at over 3,000 couples, married couples, and so many things he's discovered. But one of the things he's discovered is that what makes or breaks a relationship is how people make repair attempts. So what is a repair attempt? A repair attempt is any statement or action, verbal, physical, or otherwise, meant to diffuse negativity and keep a conflict from escalating out of control. And he describes that any statement or action, silly or otherwise, that prevents negativity from escalating out of control. And so, and it's usually when you think of repair, you're thinking of, oh, something's broken, so I got to fix it. But in this sense, it's a little different. It's not that we're trying to fix something that's broken. Okay, our partner's not broken. You know, we're not broken. Our relationship is not broken. But what happens in a conflict is that there's a disconnect that happens. And so with repairing a relationship, I mean, when we're making a repairing attempt, we're attempting to reestablish that connection. So in one sense, you could say that we're repairing the connection in our relationship. And we're a couple and we're partners, so we're a pair. So if there's a disconnect, we want to repair or come back together in our connection with each other. Because that's how much that person means to us. You know, we recognize that the relationship is much more important than some transitory conflict or problem. And we want to hurry up and get beyond that disconnect and reconnect. And we want to live in that connection with each other. So he describes that the repair attempts, they can be little simple little things that shift the dynamic or shift the conversation and ultimately shift our connection, ultimately reestablish our connection with each other. So some examples are, it can be something you say or do. So what I noticed with my wife, and this is, I don't know if this is typical for most men and women, but my wife actually, she does this naturally, so easily. It's just like it's a really natural thing for her, that if there's some disconnect between us, she takes the initiative. For me, I'm more of an internal person, and I take more time to process things. And so she reaches out often to me, which is something I appreciate, because sometimes I need to be drawn out, you know, to connect. So some of the things that John Gottman gives is that we can make statements that bring about reconnection. So how can we make this work for us, whatever the conflict is? This is important to me. Can you please listen? Or I'm listening. This is important to you. How about let's agree to disagree in this situation? And the thing is, you notice that with John Gottman, one of the things he says in relationships is that 70% of issues that people have in their relationships will never, ever be resolved. So when repair attempts is not to resolve an issue, it's reestablishing connection. So whatever it takes to move beyond a tiff or a conflict or situation, we can do that to establish our reconnection. So there's little things that my wife does, you know, little silly things, you know, that she may say or do that I'm not going to share, but it definitely just like diffuses, you know, our situation. It could be a pet name that you call each other, or a facial expression that says, yeah, I know I messed up here, you know. Or it could just be, I'm so sorry, you know, pronouns. It could be something like, you know, I feel hurt, you know, I'm here for you. You know, we're getting off track in this conversation. You know, how can this work for us? Things like that. So one of the other things that my wife established more, you know, as I pass it on to her, is the key role of friendship in connection as a foundation for the relationship.
So yeah, these repair attempts are very, very important. And one of Jagannatha Pandit's nickname is Jagannatha Pandit, because he loves words and he loves puns. So I really love how he took this word repair attempts and said repair, because you want to come together again as a pair, making the connection paramount. And so one of the questions that can come up is, when I try repair attempts, sometimes it makes things worse. So you guys are saying that repair attempts are wonderful, but lots of times when I try repair attempts, it makes things worse. So there's a few reasons, many reasons, why repair attempts may not be successful. And one reason is, as Jagannatha Pandit just mentioned, that repair attempts are built for their optimum functioning on a strong foundation. So having a friendship or treating your spouse as a friend establishes a strong foundation. So if in your daily interactions, you're intentional about saying things you appreciate about your spouse, noticing positive things they do for yourself or the household or the devotees or the community, encouraging your spouse, helping your spouse with things. So the more that you are interacting with your spouse in a way that's building and creating a strong foundation, your marriage and your unit will be much more fortified, such that when you have difficulties, you'll be more equipped and more likely to think about a repair attempt, and your spouse will be more receptive to receive it. If your ongoing daily exchanges with your spouse are arguing and anger and blocking off communication in a harsh way or not speaking for days and things like that, which may come up for all of us, but if we're not monitoring that and those things become the norm, then repair attempts are unlikely to be successful. So we want to think about ways we can increase relating with our spouse as a friend. The other reason that repair attempts may not be successful is that we may not be in a space, emotionally or mentally, to be able to make those attempts. So earlier, Mother Bajula and Ekavira talked about a very important strategy, which is taking time to calm and ground yourself. That's really, really important. And a lot of what makes relationships work is being really committed to your self-awareness, your self-growth, your self-development. And as devotees or spiritualists, that's always centered in Krishna consciousness. So as we're more aware of ourselves and what our triggers are and what our strengths are and what our weaknesses are, we can be better able to notice, hey, this is a time where I probably need to take some space. I may just need to go quietly by myself. I may take some deep breaths to kind of balance that physiological arousal. So oftentimes, or always, when we're in conflicts or we're heated, cortisol increases in our body, adrenaline increases in our body. There's a whole physiological response called fight or flight, which we've all heard of most likely, and that it's a survival mechanism, so that, you know, in a situation where there's a lion, a tiger, or a bear, or your life's at risk, then your body needs to get aroused. The blood needs to go from your head, your thinking center, to your limbs because you need to run. Your digestion slows down, your pupils dilate. So all these things get you ready to defend yourself, to save yourself from being eaten by a tiger. In this very fast-paced world, earlier, it was spoken about modern society. Modern society puts us in a very highly stressed and rushed state. So our bodies are constantly going to hyperarousal. So number one, that creates kind of a baseline of like high arousal, which may make us higher to be over responsive. And in the times we are over responsive, just the physiology of the fight or flight response, you don't have blood going adequately to your brain. Your thinking centers are not working adequately. So you're not really in a position to calmly and properly oftentimes work with your mate. So again, going somewhere quiet, breathing, chanting, doing whatever practices work for you, all your different tools that might be in your toolbox are important. And having a foundation of self-care. Sometimes we get in conflicts with our spouses because we're tired, because we haven't eaten, because we're stressed with our kids or our job. So doing things for our own personal self-care also helps our relationship. And a few more things I'll just say quickly. Love languages. So the 5 love languages, that's a book that we can read. There's different love languages. There's 5 that were the basis of this book that's been out for many years. Words of affirmation, receiving gifts, physical touch, acts of service, or quality time. So all of us value these things to some degree or another, but we tend to have one that we value the most. And we may be attempting to make a repair with our mate in a way that doesn't work for them. So someone whose love language isn't touch, and we're trying to minimize conflict or recover after a conflict and we touch the person, that's not going to be an optimal thing that'll feel like a repair. Maybe that person's love languages is words of affirmation. So it may work better for that person if you just say something like, oh, I see that maybe I wasn't listening enough to what you said, I'm sorry. So it's important to know what works for our partner. And lastly, Jagannatha Pandit spoke about this statistic from Dr. Gottman that says, from his many years of research and observation of thousands of couples, that 70% of problems are not resolvable. So for some people that can be bad news, like, wait a minute, 70% of our problems are not resolvable, what's the use? But it can also be good news because it can let you know we're all in the same boat. A lot of our struggles are normal. And those unresolvable issues, he's referring to issues that are a function of our basic personality differences. Try as we might to change our mate's personality, all of us are seeing it does not work, unfortunately. So that's an area that's kind of not going to change. Not to say we can't improve, but our basic natures and our personality traits are kind of pretty stable. And the other area is firm, kind of like a lifestyle perspective. There's certain things that are pretty stable by the time people get married. So that's not bad news. What it is that the more we can use these repair attempts, to use communication, to use the strategies that we've all been speaking about now, it can teach us how to tolerate. Tolerance is an important quality, as we know from our scriptures. So the goal is to be able to tolerate the things that aren't so resolvable, to be able to work on the situational aspects that are resolvable, and to be able to move past the conflicts as quickly as possible to go back from connection. And this is built back to connection. And this is built on a foundation, on a spiritual foundation with Krishna as the center, and using the many tools that we know and can research and learn about so that we can move past challenges and to come back to connection so we can ultimately do the work of why we're together, growing spiritually, assisting others spiritually, and serving our spiritual master, and ultimately not having to be in samsara dealing with repair attempts. We can be with Krishna in the spiritual world and be serving. Jai.
Ultimate repair.
Yeah, the ultimate repair. Back to Godhead. Hare Krishna.